Welcome to Chicks Who Fly, a podcast dedicated to women pilots and women in aviation. My name is Anaya and I am your host. I am a vocalist, DJ, producer, digital nomad, and a pilot. I have decided to stay active in the aviation community by doing this podcast, among other things. I plan to interview and feature women pilots and women in aviation and share their aviation love stories with you, as well as the ups and downs that they decide to share. In this 7th episode of Season 2 of Chicks Who Fly, I get to have a conversation with Graciela Tiscareño-Sato. Graciela is an award-winning author, bilingual public speaker, and passionate storyteller who grew up in Colorado with her 4 younger siblings and her parents, who were immigrants from Mexico. As a kid, Graciela's family didn't have the money to get on an airplane. But when young Graciela used to see airplanes fly overhead, she always got excited and wondered where they were going. In high school, Graciela had a career counselor whose husband was an Air Force major, and he became Graciela's mentor to help her go to college and earn her degree. Graciela's mother cried when Graciela was awarded a scholarship to her dream school because she realized Graciela was going to go to college 1,000 miles away. When Graciela went to college, it was with the intention of getting a degree in architecture and being in the civil engineering squadron of the Air Force. Graciela would go on to earn her bachelor's degree from the University of California at Berkeley as an Air Force ROTC scholarship cadet. Graciela's first time in an airplane, other than the military jet that transported her to the base, was with a female Air Force instructor pilot who took Graciela up for an orientation flight in a T-37. She saw potential in Graciela, partly because Graciela was the first person the instructor took up who did not throw up that day. The instructor encouraged Graciela to tell the staff at her school that she wanted to fly. This was the beginning of her career as a pilot in the Air Force. Graciela's experiences and story blew me away. Her story includes such things as flying a fueler aircraft over Baghdad, where the mission was to refuel aircraft that would take off from aircraft carriers while trying not to get shot down, and coordinating precisely so that they would meet up with perfect synchronization to get the other aircraft fuel, sometimes refueling up to 8 aircraft flying in formation around the tanker. She also learned celestial navigation and qualified to fly the F-15 2 years before women were allowed by law to fly combat aircraft, and so much more. Graciela is a national, sought-after speaker who has presented at numerous conferences to global business audiences, college students, student veterans, educators, and parents in the U.S. and Europe. In 2014, the Obama White House recognized Graciela as a champion of change, woman veteran leader for her work raising educational expectations of young Latino students through her award-winning publishing firm, bilingual literature, and public speaking business. If you are enjoying this podcast, please consider following, liking, sharing, subscribing, and perhaps checking out our Patreon page at Chicks Who Fly. Also, feel free to visit us and connect with us on our website, chickswhofly.com, and you can reach us by email at chickswhoflyofficial@gmail.com. It was a tremendous pleasure to get to spend time with this amazing lady. I hope you enjoy the conversation that I got to have with Graciela Tiscareño-Sato. Hi, Graciela. I'm incredibly excited to have you on Chicks Who Fly today. Welcome. How's it going today?
Thank you, Inaya. I'm so excited to be here and to chat with you. I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of stories to trade.
I'm excited to hear about all your stories, so I don't even want to mess around. Let's go ahead and get started by asking you to tell the listeners who you are and what your relationship to aviation is currently.
Yeah, that's a great opening question. So I am Graciela Tiscareño-Sato. I am the daughter of Mexican immigrants that somehow found herself at UC Berkeley on an Air Force ROTC 4-year scholarship that led to a military flying career, a decade-long military flying career as an officer and navigator on the KC-135 refueling tanker. So that's a flying gas station for people not familiar with that designation. And I love that 9.3 years of global aviation adventures, including combat air operations, so much that I decided to write a bilingual children's picture book series, basically to inspire children to fly in English and Español.
That is so exciting. So how did you realize that you had an interest in aviation?
Oh, I love this question. Okay. So first of all, I grew up in Colorado, in northern Colorado, and I was the oldest of 5 kids. So my parents are from Mexico, and we had never, ever, ever, ever in my entire childhood ever taken a family vacation on an airplane. That's just not the income level that we were at. So I had zero experience in airplanes. What I do remember is laying in the grass in my backyard. We were just east of the Rocky Mountains, and I would see the contrails of the airplanes flying overhead, and I would just lay there and go, I wonder where those airplanes are going. It's just this curiosity, like, I wonder where they're going. But I had never been on a plane and would never get on a plane because, again, we just didn't have that kind of money. So it wasn't until basically I went to my counselor's office in high school, and I kept saying, so, Mrs. Burgess, how does a kid like me go to college? I saw the recruiters, military recruiters in the cafeteria, and I knew that they were there to get kids to go into the military, and so that was not what I wanted. I wanted to go to college first. I don't know why I had that in my head, but I did. And so she, and this is where it's just this big miracle, she said, you know what? Come to my house for dinner. My husband is an Air Force officer, and he will tell you how he went to college because his family is even bigger than yours. Apparently he had like 8 siblings, and he was from Appalachia, and he was an Air Force major. So, and I got really lucky in that my high school counselor's husband was an Air Force officer who had gone to college on an ROTC scholarship. And then basically that just became my mentor. He just mentored me in how to get the application, how to fill it out. He told me about the physical, the interview with the 5 military officers. It's an extensive process. And meanwhile, his wife, my counselor, was helping me fill out the application for University of California, Berkeley, my number 1 school choice. And then February, my senior year, I got letters in the mail the same day that I'd been admitted to Cal, Berkeley, and that I'd been awarded the scholarship. And what I remember is my mom crying because I was going to leave because, you know, that's not what you do culturally. And I was going to go 1,000 miles away. And I had found my school and I'd found the money and I was doing it. So aviation was far from my mind. I was going into the Air Force, but my degree was architecture and I was going to be in the civil engineering squadron, or so I thought. But you know, when you put yourself in an environment like a major university and you're in a program like Air Force ROTC, these beautiful opportunities start coming your way. And the aviation moment came in a T-37 trainer airplane at Williams Air Force Base with Captain Dali Dalisa, Air Force instructor pilot. And it was an orientation flight. They offered us a chance to go fly to, you know, hey, maybe you want to go fly. You're in the Air Force program. And so I'm like, hey, sounds like a good time. Let's go. And I'd never been in an airplane. So my first time ever in a jet was that one. Well, okay, the jet that flew us to the base. That was a military jet. But then I was in this trainer, right? So we went flying, and she taught me how to do all kinds of aileron rolls, and, you know, we just did all kinds of crazy rolls. I just remember she let me fly, and it was so fun. I thought it was like a roller coaster ride. It was really a kick in the pants. And that's all I thought it was. Like, woohoo, this is fun. I was 20 years old at the time. As we're taxiing back in, she says to me, you know, You're the first person I've taken up today who hasn't thrown up. Because, you know, what happens is a lot of these guys that grow up thinking they want to be fighter pilots, but you get them in a hot jet over the Arizona desert on a July day and you do this stuff and they find out, maybe not, right? And so I just thought it was so fun. So she says, this is something you can do. She says, go back to school and tell the staff you want to fly. And I said, but my degree's in architecture, civil engineering, blah, blah, blah. She's like, no. That's just your academic major. This is the Air Force. If you want to fly, tell me you want to fly. I'm like, wow, how have I been in the program for 2 years and no one's told me that flying is even a thing I could do, right? Like, it never even occurred to me. Isn't that silly? You're in the Air Force ROTC program, but no one has told you that you can fly. So I went back and I just couldn't stop thinking about that. And so I told them I want to fly. What do I do? And she told me that there was a board process. So I did all that. So long answer to your question, but aviation is something I literally fell into because I was seeking a way to go to university and get my degree. And that lady pilot changed my life, changed the trajectory by taking me up on the flight and then just that quick little mentoring as we taxied back in. This is something you can do. Tell the staff you want to fly. There's pilot slots, navigator slots. There's weapon systems control on different aircraft in the military. Tell them you want to fly. That's how it happened. You know, a lot of kids think you have to have a pilot as a mom or dad or be in the world. I'm like, nope. My story is like, anybody can do this. You just have to know that you want to and go find a way.
That is amazing. But there is a similarity with how I began to fly in that I never thought it was a possibility for me. And then I had a young woman who was a pilot who rode in my car when I was driving for Lyft in Los Angeles on the side. And when after our conversation, I realized that it was an actual possibility for me. It had also just never crossed my mind until somebody else pointed out that it was a real possibility, and just that little shift in perspective can change the course of the rest of your life from that point forward.
Wow. So literally a female pilot got in your car when you were driving for Lyft and put the idea in your head?
Yes.
That's amazing. It's supposed to happen, right? It's supposed to happen. I just think so.
There was also another one that came afterwards that was a young gentleman who had just gotten his private pilot certificate, and I picked him up at Santa Monica Airport, and he had flown in during rush hour from Long Beach, and it had taken him 30 minutes. I'm like, you know, living in LA is very enticing.
Wow. No, that's really cool, fortuitous moments for you that just, and you said it, it's like someone else can put the idea in your head, but then you actually have to take the action, right? You actually had to go pursue, well, how can I do it and find out more? Just like I was told you can do this, tell the staff you want to fly, but I could have come back and talked myself out of it, or I could have told myself, you know, Latinos don't do this, or I could have told myself any number of lies, but I didn't because she had shifted me into thinking that it was absolutely possible. And you're already in the program, she says. You're already doing, you know, a degree that the Air Force has already recognized as valuable to the Air Force. So now just tell them you want to fly. Like, wow. And it is. It just takes that nudge.
That is it's definitely life-changing when somebody shifts your perspective like that. So then after she told you that and you got the idea in your head, how did it happen that you started to fly, and what was that experience like for you?
I basically did the paperwork and, you know, put me in for pilot, put me in for nav, put me in for weapon systems control, you know, all the different choices. I just checked all the boxes. Like, you know, I don't know what these things even are, but it sounds like fun, and I decided I wanted to go do that. So by the end of junior year at Cal, then the Air Force ROTC releases the names of the people who've been selected for pilot training and nav training and all the other classes. And so I was awarded cadet navigator wings, which means we have saved a spot for you after graduation at undergraduate navigator training in Sacramento. So then it was just a matter of graduating, a year later, and then reporting for training when the training date started. The training itself is fascinating. 32 students show up. I was the only woman in the class, and I will send that photo to you of graduation day because 32 becomes 24 because, people don't always make it through the training. Right. Pretty high washout right there at military flight training. But the graduation photo is so fun because it's 23 guys and me, and I decided to wear a skirt just to really be different. And the training itself was, academic training, just like, ground school that you've done. A lot of classroom time, and then sim time, and then we flew in the T-43, had like all these different stations with radar and navigation computers and like whatever we were going to be doing. And then we would just practice our radio procedures and, communicating with the pilots to direct the airplane and just, it was baby steps, right? But it was all the basic undergraduate nav training you have to do to be a rated officer on a crew plane in the Air Force. We didn't know what plane it would be yet, right? Because, you might end up in heavies or you might end up in fighters or something else, but everybody got the same training. And it was like 10 and a half, almost 11 months long. So it's a whole year of training beyond college. So it's one of the things I tell students, if you want to go fly for the military, you have to love learning because you're going to be learning all the time, and it takes a long time to learn all the systems and everything else. And then at every block of curriculum, we would have a check ride. And, we did crazy things like celestial navigation. I'm like, am I in the Navy? Am I in a sailboat? No, but they have sextants that stick out of the top of the plane, and you learn to read the stars and the almanacs and do the computations and take the fixes and, use the stars to navigate worldwide. So it's something that you're not going to get in general aviation, obviously, but in military missions that literally go everywhere, and you have to be able to fly no matter what, and assuming that your navigation systems might cease to exist on the ground or in the plane, right? You have to be ready for everything. So they trained us with all kinds of really cool stuff, very academic, but I loved all of it because I love math. And so that was that first training. And then at the end, you select your plane, and then you get more training in the specific airplane. And I'll tell you a quick story about the timing of my training. So there's a night when it's all meritocracy, they say. Okay, if you're at the top of the class, you get first choice. If you're at the bottom, you get the last airplane in the last location. Meritocracy. So it's called tracking night, where you know you're going to graduate. Okay, there's only a little bit of academics left, but you know you're going to graduate. So they put in our case, 24 assignments on the board, and you walk up and you say, you're first in the class. So first guy says, "Sir, Lieutenant Lovejoy selects the F-15E Strike Eagle to Luke Air Force Base, sir." And he's going for the fighter. He's going to the tactical side. And everyone's like, woohoo! Cheers. Okay. The second guy, same thing, F-15 Strike Eagle. They want to go to the fast fighters. I come up. I was in the top 12% of my class. I was one of the first people. I come up. I think I was third or fourth. I come up, and I'm like, "Lieutenant Tiscareno also selects the F-15 Strike Eagle to Luke Air Force Base, sir." And the room went very quiet because I did that 2 years before combat exclusion was lifted for women to go fly in airplanes. We were restricted by law from flying on combat aircraft. Wow. Or aircraft that would go into combat. So I did it on purpose because, hey, it's a meritocracy, right?
Right.
So I selected that fighter assignment, and then I made the colonel in front of everybody in a very quiet room say, "Lieutenant Tiscareno, by law, I cannot assign you that aircraft."
Wow.
And I just said, "Yes, sir. I want the record to show that I qualified for the F-15. Now I'll take the KC-135 to Fairchild Air Force Base, sir." So I got the first heavy, I got the first tanker, and I got my first choice base. But I tell you that because it is a continuum that women who've served in the military, I was only able to do such a little snarky move to ask for a plane I couldn't be assigned because of all the women who had done this before and opened the door so that I could even be there. Right? It's this long arc of progress for women to serve and fly in the military. And so even though I didn't get a chance to take that assignment, I said what I said, and everybody in that room got to know that, hey, these women are qualified for those assignments. They all got to see it for themselves. So in another 2 years when the law changed, and I remember being interviewed by a television station. By then I was at Fairchild on the tanker, and the TV cameras came out, and I was a public affairs rep for the squadron. And the reporter asked, are you so excited that now you can leave the tanker and go to that bomber or go to another airplane? And I said, no, I'm not excited about that because I'm already trained on this airplane. I'm about to become an instructor. So it's not about me. What I'm really excited about is that right now at pilot training and nav training, a young woman's about to step up to the microphone and request an F-15, and never again can she be denied the airplane she qualified for. That's why I'm excited. And so that's what happened. Like within a month of the law changing, Jeannie Flynn, who was training at pilot training, she stepped up to the mic. She was first in her class, and she requested the F-15 Strike Eagle and got it. And I just cried, and I was so happy. I'm like, see, I missed it by that much. But again, it was just beautiful to be able to see the progress and to see the willingness that women wanted to go fly, the fast fighters, right? We've always wanted to do that, and now we always will. And that woman right now is a general in the Air Force and one of my heroes that I met right before the pandemic started. She's now General Jeannie Levitt, and she's actually, if you've seen Captain Marvel, the movie with Brie Larson.
I personally haven't seen it yet.
Well, that's my recommendation, to see women flying fast fighters. Watch Captain Marvel. There's a character in there where she's flying the fast fighters for the Air Force, but it's before women are allowed to fly combat jets. So she's limited to test piloting. Okay, there's a character in the movie. And when they filmed all that, Brie Larson and the crew went to Nellis Air Force Base, and that's where General Jeannie Levitt was the wing commander. So the woman I just told you about that was the first to get the F-15, she became the flight lead and flew that plane, squadron commander, and she ended up being the entire wing commander at Nellis Air Force Base and part of that movie. So super cool. I got to see it all happen.
That is amazing to say that you were a part of all of that. What an inspiration. And I have goosebumps just living this story, hearing you tell it.
Well, and none of this is what I love when I meet, the Latinas in Aviation event that connected us on Instagram. I was listening to them on the stage, and they were like, I wanted to be a pilot when I was 4 years old. And I'm like, God bless you. That's so awesome that you had that aspiration since you were a little kid, because you saw it, right? But that's not my story. My story is this weird story of opportunity being presented and this mentor and saying yes and seeing where else can this take me. So it's this curiosity and then finding myself in the training and then realizing that I'm really good at it. I'm great at the math and I can think really fast, and I love being part of the dynamic environment of a flight crew, especially in tactical situations and, an airplane that's refueling gas. And I mean, the whole thing was crazy, but when you look back, that was never my plan. So that's why I think it's so important to tell these stories. And I thank you for broadcasting and amplifying the story so that kids can know about these things, these careers that are so unusual, especially for women, right? And know that they don't have to know exactly what they want to do. And everybody keeps asking them, what do you want to do when you grow up? I don't know. just put yourself somewhere awesome where more things can come your way, and just say yes to things that are unusual and say yes to things that sound kind of scary and weird, because that's where the magic of life happens. That's certainly what I found to be true. And as soon as I qualified on the tanker, I went to Fairchild, and my first assignment, my first overseas deployment Okay, I remember I wanted to travel. I want to know where those airplanes go. The very first place they send me is Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, at the very end of the Gulf War Part 1, as I like to call it. It was Operation Southern Watch, and it was my very first deployment. Was all the way, well, first we flew to London, to Mildenhall Air Base, on a Royal Air Force Base, and then we overnighted there for a couple of days, and then we flew direct to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. So just like that, and I wrote a blog article about this, about my first deployment, and like thinking, wow, I can't wait to tell Mommy and Papi about this. Because this is pretty crazy, right? Like, look where I'm at. The whole thing was pretty wacky, and that was the very, very beginning. The very first trip was straight into a war zone for combat air operations.
Oh, my goodness. What did your parents think of that? I mean, both from the time that you started flying to this first deployment, were they nervous, excited, scared?
I think all of those things, but the most important thing is literally they had no idea what the heck I was even talking about. I mean, because it's such a different world from, you know, the little tract house in Colorado where my dad drives to every day to be a sastre. You know, he was a tailor and my mom stayed home with the kids. And to get a phone call from your daughter, it's like, yeah, nos vamos a Inglaterra y nos vamos a Arabia. Y sí, ya no hay guerra tanto, sí es poquito peligroso. You know? So I'm like, yeah, the war's over, but yeah, they're still sending the enemy planes up to get, yeah, it'll still be dangerous. And, you know, trying to like explain, I can only imagine what it must have been like for my mom to get those phone calls, right? Because she was just nervous that I moved 1,000 miles away from Colorado to California at the age of 18 to live in a dorm. I mean, that made her nervous, right? And now 4.5 years later, but then 5 years later after all the training, I'm calling her telling her, you know, that I'm about to deploy for 2 months to Saudi Arabia. And if I really had told her what we were doing, she would have been really scared. But I just kind of told her, yeah, we're going to go over there and fly. And I didn't say, yeah, we'll be over Baghdad every day. I didn't say that.
Yeah, probably that was best.
We flew over Baghdad, so we did not go land in Iraq. That was not what we were doing. We were basically, the mission there was to have a sustained combat air patrol over Iraq. There was a no-fly zone in the north, and there was a no-fly zone in the south. And our job basically was to put the flying gas station right on the top there, and we make our presence known so that Saddam Hussein would not launch his MiGs and would not go kill his own people and would not launch his helicopters. So we basically would try to keep civilians from being killed by him. And so we would get airplanes flying off of aircraft carriers coming up to us to refuel, and then we just had a sustained combat air patrol that just kept his airplanes from coming up. And when they did launch, guess who they came for? He would launch the fighters, and guess what their target always was?
The fueler, so because of the other one?
Fuel! Exactly. So they would launch MiGs straight at the tankers because their goal was to shoot the tanker out of the sky, take the fuel out, and then all the fighters have to go back and land and leave them alone, and then they could fly more planes. So we were the target, and he would come at us, you know, they would come at us, and then the AWACS, the airborne warning systems, AWACS, basically the airplane with the big spinning disc on the top, you might have seen pictures of it. It's basically a big radar plane, and it can see everything. So they know the moment that they're in the air, and they're telling us where they are, and we'd have to retrograde was the word, you know, coded messages to get the heck out of there at the right time. And so we would gas up the planes, we would turn and just go fast, and then our fighter escorts would go engage the MiGs to get them off of us. But yeah, missiles were fired, you know, they couldn't really reach us because, you know, they're trying to fly so fast. The Russian MiGs that he had were flying so fast at us to catch us, they run out of fuel very fast, whereas we've got fuel for days and days and days. So they might have gotten lucky enough to get close enough one time, but thankfully they never actually did because the supports were in place to alert us. But I'll tell you what, that was an insane first deployment for a little lieutenant. It was insane to actually have that kind of action, right? And to be hearing the coded messages that would tell us that the MiGs are, you know, 28 miles away and closing at this angle and from this direction. And then, telling the pilots, at a certain time, like 45-degree bank, let's get the heck out of here. Let's go. And, because having that situational awareness of we're here, they're coming from there, and the fighters are with us, and let's get out. So those are called O1 sorties. The operational, 1, O2 is combat support. But we were O1 because we were right in the middle of all of that. And so we logged O1 sorties, and then, every day. And sometimes we would fly even 2 times and 3 times a day. We'd fly with a whole bunch of gas, offload it to a bunch of fighters, come back and land, eat some food, and go up again. Because we had 16-hour crew duty days that we could fly there. And so sometimes we just flew 3 times a day. There's only 4 crews in the beginning. I tell you this because what happened next is crazy. So there's 4 crews, and my crew was the only one that had a woman on it. The other crews are all male. So 16 crew members, 1 woman to do this operation right after the war ended and Southern Watch started. So after, I want to say 25 or 30 sorties, the commander of the base can put in a package to recognize the air crews with an air medal for meritorious service while sustained in aerial flight and combat operations, whatever the citation is. So they send the package to the Pentagon, and then the packages come back with the medals, right? Well, they got 3 packages with 4 medals each, and a letter that said that Captain Wayment's crew, which is my aircraft commander, cannot be recognized with an air medal because there's a female on the crew.
Oh, my. Oh, sorry.
So I've already been there and flown how many times? And now they're like, oh, sorry, we can't recognize that you're here doing that. And so imagine what it was like to be a guy on my crew.
Wow.
Imagine what it was like to be me on the crew.
Oh, my God. I read the book, The Women with the Silver Wings, and I saw so many stories of women being discriminated against in this way in the military, but your story is just much more recent, which begs the question, how is it still even happening?
Well, so, earlier I said it's this long arc of history that is the progress. Okay. So the week before the pandemic was declared, I was at the Women in Aviation International Conference in Orlando. And part of the tradition of that conference is a social in the evening hosted by the Women Military Aviators, which is an association exactly as it sounds. So those of us who have worn the uniform, the flight suit before, and those who are serving now, everybody is invited. It is one of the most beautiful events. There's women who are astronauts. There's women who are retired pilots. My friend Kelly Hamilton was there. I'm going to tell you what she told me. We were talking about the story I just told you about the not getting the air medal. And she said to me, well, you need to understand what happened during the war just a year and a half before you got there, because that's when she was flying the tanker. Okay, so she filled in something I didn't know was happening, and that was the women were fully trained to be tanker air crews and do the mission. But during the actual war, they would send the men, and they wouldn't deploy the crews with the women. So she says, so here we are in the squadron, and we're not being sent to the fight. They wouldn't send us. So we actually had to go to our commander and say, sir, we want to go. We want to go to Saudi Arabia. We want to go fly there. We want to be part of this war. Like, send me, coach. Put me in, coach. Because they're like, what the hell, right? Because you know what's going to happen, okay? The men go there. The men will get the air medals. The men will then get promoted. And, you're operational, you're combat, aviator, you got the wings. Now you got the air medal. You're the future generals of the Air Force. Meanwhile, women, you just stay home. That's literally what was happening. Because they'll get the combat time. They'll get the accolades. The women who are doing exactly the same job as them will not get it. That's what was happening. And I'm talking about, 1990 when the war was happening, 1991. So she told me we were actually telling them to send us to the war because we wanted to go do our job over there because we knew how to do it. they weren't sending us. And then when they did agree to send us, she told me, they would send us for no more than 2 weeks, and we just get to fly a handful of sorties and then come home. So they were not allowed to stay there to fly long enough to have this controversy that happened to me happen. They were sent back. So I didn't know that, right? Because when that was happening to them, I was a little kid in training, right? I was a second lieutenant in training, so I had no way of knowing what was happening in operational units. So she filled that in for me just in March 2020. So she thought it was hilarious that just a year and a half later, here I am. I slipped through the cracks. Oops. We sent a crew with a woman, and we forgot to send them back because they needed us to be there, right? And so I just look back and I see, wow, it literally is this long arc of injustices and denials and discrimination that have happened. And that's what I said earlier. Like, I was only there because all of that had happened before. I see it now. But my story has a very good ending, see? The colonel, who was our commander in Saudi Arabia, when he got that letter from the Pentagon, he said, this is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. So he sent an appeal letter back to the Pentagon appealing that decision, that we have flown, the same, if not more sorties than the people that they sent the awards to. And that, I'm a fully qualified crew member and that the crew deserves the Air Medal, all 4 of us. So he appealed it. He didn't have to, but he did. Because it was obviously an injustice, right? And so then he sent it back, and then, we stayed there another probably after not getting the Air Medal, and I still had to fly every day. My crew still had to fly every day. So, like, whatever, we're still doing our job. Literally we didn't care. We had to just kind of forget about it because we're doing our job. But we came back to our base, and then I want to say about 2 to 3 months before Congress changed the law and lifted the combat exclusion for women in airplanes, very close to that time is when we quietly received a package at our base with the 4 Air Medals.
Wow.
So in the end, they did send it to us. In the end, there was a little ceremony at our squadron. So, like a handful of people got to see it versus what we saw in Saudi Arabia, which is like a big thing. And so, yeah, I got my Air Medal. I got it. And again, I didn't even know that I cared about that when they sent me. Right? I didn't know, but it's the way that it happened that I felt kind of jaded about it, But I've come to understand how important that distinction actually was to an aviator and to a military officer. And footnote to that whole story is last August when Univision was doing a story after Vanessa Guillen was killed at Fort Hood. They did a story interviewing Spanish-speaking Latina veterans about our service. The guy in Miami wanted to say on air when he introduced me that I was the first Latina in the Air Force to get an Air Medal for combat air. No. You cannot say that because I do not know that to be true. I'm telling you a story, but I'm not saying there was a first. No, don't say it. So he didn't say it. But then after the interview, I got curious because I thought, I wasn't really even supposed to be there. Right? So if I wasn't even supposed to be there, what are the chances that other Latina aviators had ever been there enough to get an Air Medal? I'm thinking pretty low, right? So I asked the question officially of the Air Force Personnel Center. Please tell me, the first 3 Latina or the Hispanic identifying aviators in the Air Force who ever received an Air Medal for combat operations. And the Air Force Personnel Center came back and confirmed that, yep, I was the first one. So 27 years after getting that medal, I learned that I indeed was the first Latina to get it, which I never would have even had that question in my head had it not been for that journalist. But I think that's hilarious and funny because, again, I wasn't even supposed to be there. So how about that?
Well, you were qualified and you were killing it, and I'm sure refueling other airplanes with a giant flying gas station is not easy. What is that process like for those of us who that is foreign to?
Well, it is a crazy job, I'll say that. It starts with a lot of coordination before we fly, calling the receiver unit, and that was always my job. So the navigator is basically in charge of all the mission timing and the rendezvous and the meetup and everything. So I would call and talk to, the bombers, the Navy, whoever the unit was that's going to send airplanes up to get gas that day. And I would coordinate, call signs and altitudes and airspeeds and just double check the fuel load they need and all of that. And then that was part of our mission briefing. So in addition to your general aviation briefing that you get, about where you're going to go and all of that, your emergency airfields, there's this other layer of coordinating with the other unit that you're meeting up with. So that was my job to brief all that. And then, of course, we synchronize our watches. Very important, a time hack, so that our watch and their watch, the receivers coming up, are exactly showing the same exact second right now. Because the speeds that we fly, we're flying 7 miles a minute. So you can't be 15, 20 seconds off. So you miss each other, right? So all that coordination happened before we flew. And then the actual mission, then it's a matter of geographically coordinating. When you enter the track, it's an aerial refueling track. And they're all over the United States. They're over the ocean. So you enter at an aerial refuel initial point. So you enter the track. And so, in the United States, they're like restricted airspaces. You might have seen them. They're designated R on your charts. Within the restricted zones and sometimes outside the restricted zones are the aerial refueling tracks. And you'll never see them because they're up at, 20, 25,000 feet. But they're designated little race tracks where the refueling happens. So in the tactical setting, you enter at the aerial refueling control point, and that's where you meet up with your receiver. And sometimes we're refueling one plane, but sometimes we're refueling 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Seriously?
Yeah. And they're flying in formation. So the pictures that we get from the tanker are so beautiful because the formation, it's beautiful. So, and then when they're waiting for gas, they're on the right side of the plane. And after they get their gas, they go off your left wing. So you can just imagine the photography that you can get out the window. I'll send you some of my favorites, like the F-117 stealth fighter over the Grand Canyon.
Yes,
like, here's the wing, here's the fighter, here's the Grand Canyon. I love that. So I have quite the collection. So then my job was to do the math so that we enter the initial point of the track at the right time, and then we're over the ARCP, the aerial refueling control point. That's the latitude and longitude where the receiver plane and us have to fly over that and be, we're in front of them 3 miles. So very exacting. And, we either flew at each other and then I called the turn at the right time, depending on the bank angle, time to turn, blah, 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 so that we roll out exactly 3 miles in front of them. And then that's what you do. So it's this exacting rendezvous procedure that gets the planes together. And then once we're in front of them and they're behind us and about a half a mile, then the navigator hands off the radios to the boom operator, who now is laying on her stomach in the back of the plane looking out her window, flying the flight control called the boom, where the gas is going to come out of our 10 tanks. And then she's got visual on the receivers coming up. And then she's got the only view. The 3 officers in the front, we're just driving the plane so that the boom operator can do their job. They're just a joke about that. Like, the enlisted guys would say, the only job in the Air Force are 3 officers drive you to work. Because literally we're all there so the boom operator can connect the boom to the receiver to offload the gas. We just exist for that purpose, which is actually true. So then the boom has the visual with the receivers, and then they just do the radios the whole time. The receivers go to the right wing to wait. And then, he or she, in our case, I flew with a lot of women booms. They say, okay, you're clear to contact. So they tell the receiver to come up, and then they come up to pre-contact, which is 50 feet away from the boom. And then, they say clear to contact. Then they just fly themselves up, and then she flies the boom into the receptacle. The boom literally has little wings on it, and it's controlled with the joystick. So the joystick controls left and right, and she's got an azimuth control. The joystick controls the telescoping, the in and out, the length of the boom. And then the joystick also controls, 2 different controls for this, but it also controls the elevation up and down. So she's got gauges back there that are controlling that flight control surface to plug the other airplane. So when I speak at schools and I describe aerial refueling, I just tell the kids, watch your parents put gas in the car. They put the hose in the hole, and then they hit a button, and then the fuel comes out. So we're doing exactly the same thing at 420 miles an hour, 5 miles up in the sky. But it's pretty much the same thing.
No biggie.
So that's what it's like. And then the pilots just have to match the airspeed. And the receiver pilot has to, get really good at visually station keeping, where their plane is supposed to be while they're getting the gas. And then, of course, we have emergency procedures for when things go wrong, as they sometimes will, to call a breakaway, is what they call it. So the boom operator is, the only one who can see it coming. We have no rearview mirrors up front. So we just rely on her, and she would call breakaway, 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 on the radio, which means get the heck up away. So we just fly high and up. She just connects the boom. We fly high and up, and the receiver just descends. And so we just get altitude separation very fast. Take a deep breath and say, is everybody okay? What the heck was that just happened? Whatever happened. And then when everything's good, then you just continue the refueling. And you probably want to ask me if we ever got hit.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask, what are the things that can go wrong? I would assume they involve potentially getting hit.
Yeah, so, there's always thermals, right? So unstable air situations which throw the planes around. So that could cause the receiver to slam upwards into the tanker very unexpectedly. So if you've experienced turbulence ever, imagine that happening while you're connected to another plane.
No.
So yeah, that's one of them. Usually that wasn't the case. So, we kind of adjust, you get used to that. But the one where we actually did get hit was, it happened in that, I think it was actually the second or third time I went to Saudi Arabia. But flying over Iraq, flying over the desert at night when there's still threats on the ground, we would turn all the lights off.
Yeah.
So now you're coming up to refuel, and instead of the tanker having the lights on, say, hey, we're over here, then it really becomes a matter of the receiver having just enough lights on to be able to see the plane that you're flying under, right, to get connected. But you're trying to be dark so that you're not an obvious target in the sky, right? And so it was one of those missions with a Navy plane. It was an A6 actually, where in the process of trying to get connected, he basically hit our plane. So coming up, and then like an actual, you felt it kind of hit. And, of course, the boom called a breakaway. We got away from each other. And what ended up happening is he tore his probe off his plane in the impact. And so he could not receive. They don't have a receptacle like Air Force jets. They have a probe that sticks out and goes into a drogue basket thing. And he basically ripped off the probe. So somebody the next day in the Iraqi desert found a piece of metal that looks like an L shape, and they're like, what's this? But it fell off the plane, and so he couldn't refuel. He had to go back and land on his aircraft carrier. And for the bumps that we felt, you'd think there'd be a dent there, but, it's an airplane and they don't dent easily. So, but that was pretty scary because it was totally dark, and then you just felt the impact.
That sounds scary, and just the level of precision and coordination that this act takes would make a lot of people assume that it's just not something that's humanly possible, yet people in the military this is the talent to figure out these very precise, crazy missions that allow us to do what we need to do. So that's pretty amazing.
Well, it's the training, it's the training, it's the instructors, it's the hours and hours and hours and hours of training that, anybody who flies knows that mastery comes from all that training. And in the second children's book, I actually address that because it's really like a frequently asked question that I get at schools. Isn't it scary to fly and be connected to another airplane? And I say in the book, there's no need to be scared when you've learned to do something well.
Right.
Because that's it. Like, confidence comes from mastery, right? From skills mastery. And you don't have the confidence when you're starting. I mean, you might be confident that you're good at learning, but you certainly don't have the confidence of being able to do whatever it is you're learning until later after mastery. And it's the same thing in the military, for this crazy mission is in the beginning, like the first 9 flights at training with pilot, co-pilot, navigator, and boom operator the very first time we were training. Our poor boom operator, she's just back there just throwing up because she's laying on her stomach watching a plane come at her. And, just trying to process all that information. Her brain was having a hard time, like, focusing on her control of the joystick while watching a plane come at her. She was terrified. She was 18 years old from West Virginia. She's like, why is this bomber flying at me? So in the beginning, you know, that's when you realize how crazy and dangerous it is. But then once you get checked out, once you learn the crew coordination, once everybody learns their job and masters their job and masters the communication, gets trained on the emergency procedures, then it's what you do. And then only later do you get reminded that it's actually kind of dangerous.
Absolutely. It definitely shows the importance of learning to do things well and being committed to excellence. You and your life and other people's lives depend on it.
I love how you said that. Yeah. You're committed to excellence. So you're not like, well, I learned to do this good enough. Right. That's not how we do it. Like, we all want to be really good at this because so much can go wrong, right? And you don't want to have a pilot that's good enough, right? And you don't want to have a boom operator that's good enough. You know, sometimes they miss and sometimes they squirt fuel all over the place. They're good enough. No, you want excellence. And the same thing with the navigator position. You know, if you're only good enough, then you're going to miss, you know, you're going to mess up half the rendezvous, and then it's really embarrassing. Then you lose time trying to get the airplanes together when the tanker ended up behind the receiver because you made a math mistake. Like, you don't want that, right? You want the excellence, you want the mastery, and then you want the confidence. And I think that's part of the ethos of being military air crew is nobody wants to just be good enough. Everybody wants to really rock it and really know what they're doing and be known for doing it well. Because then when that happens, that's the other thing with crews is that you don't always fly hard crews, as they say. It's soft crews. The schedule changes, right? So your skills need to be applied on any crew with any airplane on any given day. So you can't be good at just flying with these three people because your skills are subpar. You have to depend on these other people covering for you. That's just not how it works. You have to be your own professional and be really good at what you do. And, you know, the check rides and the pop quizzes that they do, they'll come into the squadron and just give you like a pop emergency procedures quiz. It's a very popular thing to do. Just instructor comes in and just quizzes you, right? And if you don't verbally respond with your exact emergency procedure, you don't fly that day. Seriously, everybody needs to be top notch, and that's what we aim for.
It's a fantastic way to approach life. So hopefully once military members retire and move on to other phases of their life, I'm sure it's only natural to apply them to everything else that you do.
Well, yes, but before you do, you know, I remember the colonel who chose me to go to instructor school. Okay, they say this: we don't decide to upgrade you to instructor until we want another 100 of you walking around. Yeah, because if you are subpar at what you do, why would they want another 100 of you walking around, right? You want to be excellent, and then they'll send you to instructor school so now you can train another 100 people or more to do your job. And so it's really an honor to be chosen to upgrade to instructor, and then you go to learn how to teach the craft that you know, and then you come back and then you're responsible for teaching. So that was really cool to actually be able to then teach more people coming into the unit everything they needed to do to get really good at the refueling and the crew coordination. And then, of course, by then having all the deployment experience and the tactical experience. And so that was really, that part I loved too, because it went from just doing it all the time being air crew to now being responsible for someone else learning to fly and to do the mission. I really love that phase of the career. And then, then you bring that into you bring that mindset of excellence and continuous learning, lifelong learning into your life after the military as a civilian.
So from where we left off, how did you get to where you are today and this series of books that I really want you to tell me about?
So I didn't retire. I separated. So separation happens when you leave the service, the active service, before 20 years. So it wasn't a retirement. I was a senior captain. I was about to go to my majors board, to get promoted. And I had asked my commander, okay, so all signs are pointing to me getting promoted since I've done, I've got the wings, got the combat, got the master's degree, and I've been in squadron officer school. So, I'm ready for the promotion. But what happens after the promotion? It's like, the first thing they're going to want you to do is go to Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, Air Mobility Command Headquarters, and be a staff officer. I'm like, ew. Desk job. That's not why I joined the Air Force. So I'm like, I just want to keep on flying. Can I move out to Okinawa, Japan, and keep on flying? No. When we get promoted, to major, the next rank after that is colonel. And to get promoted from major to colonel, you need to go do staff duty. I'm like, I don't want to do staff duty. Right? And so it becomes a pathway shift, because if you want to stay in and make a career, then, you do this, and then you go be a colonel, and then you go to the Pentagon, and then you become a full-bird colonel. I mean, some of you will make general, most of you will get out. So I'm like, but nowhere are you flying anymore. Right now you're in the policy and the that was not interesting to me. I was in for the aviation at that point. And I didn't even tell you that along the way I got to go work for NATO on the battle staff during the Bosnia-Herzegovina conflict. So I got selected to go work in Europe on the battle staff and basically oversee all the air operations coming in and out of Bosnia-Herzegovina and surrounding areas, Croatia. And they needed a rated officer, aeronautical rating, that spoke at least one other language besides English, and I spoke Spanish and Italiano. I got to go do that for 4 months, almost 5. So I got to move to Vicenza, Italy, and be part of NATO and work with the Germans and the French and the Spaniards and the British and the Greeks and everybody in NATO, and control their airplanes and fly with the Norwegians into Sarajevo wearing Kevlar. I got to do this other cool stuff related to flying and controlling the airspace. And then later, like the last thing I did before I decided I wanted to get out, was I went to work because of the Spanish language. I got to work as a military liaison officer at our U.S. Embassy in Quito, Ecuador. And that was totally different. That was not flying at all. And that was purely working as a staff person. So I took a little taste of the staff work. Can I say that? I tasted the staff work that they told me was going to happen next for me. And I did non-flying work for an embassy, for our embassy down there. And I loved that work because of all the Equatorian Air Force friends I made. But there was no flying.
Right.
So I came back and I finished my master's thesis at this point, and I came back and I decided that it's time to close this chapter and go do the next thing. So what was the next thing? I finished my master's, got out, got hired into Silicon Valley as a global marketing manager for telecommunications industry. Crazy career change. Look at that. Airplane, radar, navigation, instructor, and now I'm in Silicon Valley doing global marketing for technology.
My head is
is it spinning?
My head is spinning trying to follow all of this. What a remarkable and varied career. Very remarkable. But please go on.
Well, see, I never had a plan, right? I didn't have a plan. My only plan is I want to be an educated woman and go to college. And then whatever's going to happen is going to be a big surprise to me because, when you're the daughter of immigrants and you don't have professional role models, and I think everything's available to you. That's the way I see it. And so this became what I wanted to do based on my master's thesis and based on my getting that particular degree and wanting to continue to work globally, because really the Air Force just opened up my brain to like, oh my God, look, there's all these places that exist to be part of, to work in, right? And so I came back and I got hired by a German company headquartered in Munich with offices in San Jose, California. So this is the German company Siemens outsourcing their marketing to the United States. And so I was brought in by somebody who knew me actually from Berkeley. So this is a professional network. And I did 10 years of global marketing end to end, from understanding the technology, launching the product, doing the press interviews, coaching the executives on how to speak about our products, briefing executives from the Fortune 1000 who would come to us from Europe and South America to hear about the latest products. I would do those briefings in English and Espanol and Italiano. And really learning about marketing, business communications, the process to create, launch products into the world. And so when the global financial crisis happened in 2009 and everybody in San Jose got laid off, then I was ready to start my own business. And what I had been doing really was always public speaking, always writing, always communicating, going to conferences, telling stories. And so this became my moment to think, okay, what do I want to do next, right? And by then, I had 3 kids that I didn't have while in the Air Force, because why would I have kids and go to Saudi Arabia, right? So I had my children just after getting out, 3 kids in 5 years. And so when that happened, it was time to okay, what's next? And I just took time to think about what are the things I love to do. And I love to storytell, and I love to communicate. I love to inspire. So I created Gracefully Global Group in the fall of 2010, and we're in the business of inspiración. I have that bilingual tagline. We're in the business of inspiración because everything we create is to inspire and really motivate readers, parents, teachers, kids, teenagers to think about what's possible. And so we create books, products, and services for K-12 school districts, for university students, community college. We serve Hispanic community. We serve military families in a variety of ways. And what you're referring to is what happened when my little boy saw me in my flight suit before Veterans Day and started asking about the patches, taking them off my flight suit and asking about the patches and what they mean. And I was able to then just answer spontaneously what the patch was about, what it represented, why I served, what I did. And when he left the room, my husband was recording because he'd never seen me in my flight suit before. It was the night before Veterans Day, and he was in preschool. So my husband's recording, and you see him as he walks out the door to go to bed. He says, "I love you, Captain Mama." So he made it up right there on the spot because he had asked me about the captain rank and asked me everything else. So as he's leaving my room, he says, "I love you, Captain Mama." And it was just this creative moment where I went, oh, my God, wait. Do women who have served in the military even write books for kids? Because he just made up a character, right? And so I started researching, no, women veterans write memoirs. They don't write books for kids. I found one book written by a woman veteran for children, but it wasn't about her military career at all. So then I thought, what about bilingual books? Do we have any bilingual books for, like, women are flying airplanes? Zero. Because I had all the bilingual books in my house about the tamales and the tortillas, and she's making chocolate with her abuela. I have all those books, but she's always in the kitchen. And the girl is always in the kitchen cooking with her mom and grandma. And I'm like, damn it, we need something else. We need something inspirational. So how about, Mama's flying the jet. So all night till 4 a.m, I was just looking at all this, and I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about, I need to do this. I need to create this books and tell my story, which I never had written my memoirs. Well, I've written them, but I haven't finished them. So I was not telling my story about everything we just talked about today. I was not telling my service story, my military story, my aviation story, how I got a scholarship. I wasn't telling any of that to anybody. I was not. I was a corporate marketing professional telling software stories, right? But my son inspired me to think of this way that I could tell my story, but in a way that is true to the mission of my company, which is we're in the business of inspiración. So it became this idea that I'm going to tell my story as a veteran, as an aviator, and as a Latina who did all that, but I'm going to tell it in English and Spanish in children's books. And we're going to tell this crazy story about this airplane and this crew that works together and what everybody on the crew does. And we're going to tell the story through the voice of a little boy, Marco, who is proud of his mama who flies the planes, and we'll let him be the narrator. And that's what the Captain Mama book series is. It's my story through the eyes and voice of a little boy who is inspired by my son, modeled after my son.
Eso está fantástico.
Gracias. Lo hago con todo mi corazón y todo mi amor.
In this part here, I said, that is fantastic. And she said, thank you. I do it with all my heart and all my love. And it shows. So it's very exciting. I think it's very important. I know that you have to go pretty soon. So I want to ask you really quickly, is there anything that you want to say before you go to someone who aspires to have a similar career as you have had?
I'll answer with a little story of the very first time I went to an elementary school after we launched Good Night, Captain Mama, Buenas noches, Capitan Mama. I got a call from the school counselor. He was an African-American man, and he had seen a story about what I was doing. And so he asked me the most fascinating question, the very first school visit. He says, can you come to our school and do the Veterans Day Assembly, but do it in Spanish? And it's awesome to think about this because this was 8 years ago, okay? And Veterans Day is coming up next month. So I'm booking virtual author visits right now, virtual assemblies. But this is the first one. And A.D. Briscoe is his name. So I said, ooh, tell me more. She said, yeah, we're a Title I school. 78% of the children are English language learners. So Spanish is the language that they speak and the teachers speak English. So he says it would be really cool to have a Veterans Day assembly in Espanol, for the kids. And I was like, my heart is exploding just at the idea, right? So I went there, and what I did for that first assembly, and what I've done for all the assemblies, is we project the illustrations of the book on the screen so that I'm not trying to hold a book in front of 500 kids, right? Look at the tiny picture. So we project the illustrations because Linda Lenz, the illustrator, does this amazing job bringing the story to life. And so we project the illustrations. I read the book. 15 minutes is all it takes. And then it was just Q&A the rest of the time. All these children asking me questions in Espanol about going to college, about money for college, about what my parents thought about it. Was it scary? All the questions that you could imagine that children would come up with. We ran out of time because there were so many amazing questions. And everything was in Espanol. And as they were leaving at the end, the little kindergartners sit in the front, and then the fifth graders are in the back. Standard seating at assemblies. And this little girl in front of me, she gets up, and as they're walking out, she literally stops right in front of me. I remember, the kids behind her slammed into her, but she stopped so suddenly in the line. But she wanted to tell me something, right? And so she stops right there, and she reaches up, and she yanks on my sleeve, and she says, Capitana Mamá, yo también quiero volar aviones como tú.
Oh, cosita. In this part, the little girl says, Captain Mama, I want to fly airplanes like you.
And I literally, just stood there because I've been working on this book for 3.5 years. It's been a long time since my son inspired me to do this. And the books are in the world. People are hearing the story. And here I am doing the very first school event in Spanish. And this is the first feedback I get from a 5-year-old.
Wow.
Whew. So I got down on my knee and I held her hand and I looked her in the eye and I told her, vas a aprender todo el inglés y vas a aprender cómo leer y la ciencia, matemática, todo lo que se necesita para volar aviones o cualquier cosa que quieres hacer. And don't you ever let anybody tell you that you can't.
This means you're going to learn how to speak English and how to read and how to do all the science and all the math and everything that is required to fly airplanes and anything else that you want to do.
Because I wanted her to know that she's going to learn everything she needs to fly airplanes or whatever she wants to do, and don't let anybody stop her and tell her she can't. Because I don't know about your parents, but if I had come home at the age of 5, Anaya, and if I had told my mom that I wanted to go fly because I just heard this woman at my school, my mother would have told me, ¿Estás loca? Right? She would have not supported that idea because that's one crazy thing to have your little girl say. So let's encourage our kids to do the craziest, most technical things that we can never imagine ourselves doing, right? Let's open those doors. Let's get the stories, the books, the Latinas in Aviation book that brought us together. 22 stories of really outlier Latina women in aviation, military, and civilian, right? Get these stories. We're creating these books to do a ripple effect, to be those role models that we never saw, that we didn't even know we needed to see. I had no idea about any of this was going to happen in my life. And so I feel a special sense of responsibility because my story is so crazy to show up, to inspire the next and the next, and to just keep putting those seeds in their minds. And that little girl, that 5-year-old that said, "Yo también quiero volar aviones como tú," that was the most amazing validation of why we need this work and why it's important that we tell our stories, especially when they're unusual, especially when we're chicks that fly, right? Because it's so weird still, because our numbers are so low, right? And so I just think that's the advice is let's just really flood our children with these images and these possibilities, because the sky is not the limit. I mean, like, they're growing up at a time when, like, space tourism is a thing. So, like, what's next, right? And I'm just so on fire about that need to bring these stories into our communities in multiple languages so that one day this story will not be so unusual. It'll just be common for our community and our girls. That's my hope.
And that concludes this episode of Chicks Who Fly. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. I hope that you have enjoyed these conversations as much as I enjoy creating them. Thank you for sharing your aviation love story with us. You can reach us at chickswhoflyofficial@gmail.com or visit our website, chickswhofly.com. Also, if you'd like to be a more intimate part of the creation of this podcast, please check out our Patreon, Chicks Who Fly, where you can support us for as little as $3 per creation. Thank you again so much